Can everybody hear me now? Okay. Welcome to FORES. As many of you know, we are a think tank working on reforms and sustainability, as we say, and one of our main focus, if not the main focus area, is environmental policy, but we also have a very keen interest in international politics. As we can see here, as soon as we touch upon the issues concerning international politics in the United States, many people are very interested. And therefore, with this combination of both interest in international relations and environmental economic policy, we now have this fantastic opportunity today to have a presentation and a short Q&A session with Mrs. Bay Fang, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State of the United States. So working with European and Eurasian affairs. Your background is, I'm happy to hear. Also in journalism, you have covered Afghanistan, Iraq, you've been bureau chief in Beijing, also an alumni from Harvard and Oxford. What we'll do today is, if I may say that, we'll make a presentation and we will have some questions afterwards, and at the end we will also give you some minimal information about our new project about linking the European and the Californian carbon markets. The US is sometimes here in Europe being perceived as the bad guy in terms of climate efforts, and Europe, of course, claims or prides itself to be the good guy in those negotiations. And you are the person who is set now within Mrs. Hillary Clinton's service to bridge this gap, and you will tell us how to begin with. Thank you. The word is yours.
Thank you so much, Martin. It's really a pleasure to be here. So I wanted to thank you, Martin, and to thank Daniel Engstrom from FORES as well for organizing this event. I understand that the U.S. Embassy here in Stockholm has worked with you on a number of occasions in the past, and I just wanted to extend my appreciation to you as partners. Both on the domestic and the international level, the U.S. has declared that reducing greenhouse gas emissions, increasing energy security, and creating quality green jobs are our top priorities. We're now pleased to see that these policies, some of which I'll talk about in a moment, are yielding real results. The International Energy Agency came out with a report this spring saying that the U.S. has reduced greenhouse gas emissions by nearly 8% since 2006. And that's actually more than any other country in the world. In addition, we've reduced our imports of foreign oil from 65% to 45%. Between 2010 and 2011 alone, the U.S. reduced oil imports by 1 million barrels per day, which is 10%. And all of this while creating thousands of green-collar jobs. So how did this change come about? Well, in all likelihood, there were many factors. Clean energy policies have been crucial. One of President Obama's first acts in office was to sign the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which contains unprecedented investments in clean energy, $90 billion worth, to ensure that the United States gets on a path to a more dynamic, low-carbon economy. To reduce American dependence on fossil fuels and increase our energy security, the United States has, among other things, announced higher fuel economy standards for vehicles and implemented a successful program to help Americans replace older cars with more efficient ones. In the transportation sector, we've also seen the U.S. go from having merely 500 electric vehicle charging stations in 2008 to nearly 18,000 today. So it's a part of a broader initiative to put 1 million electric vehicles on the road. The president has also announced a blueprint for a secure energy future, which set out a goal to generate 80% of our electricity from a diverse set of clean energy sources by 2035. President Obama recognizes that this ambitious goal will only be possible to reach through working with a clean and innovative clean energy sector. In fact, he's asserted that clean energy jobs are the jobs of the future. And in his State of the Union address last year, he said that clean energy technology is an investment that will strengthen our security, protect our planet, and create countless new jobs. Another tangible example of a program that has enabled the United States to decrease greenhouse gas emissions is the so-called weatherization program. Weatherization is another name for retrofitting or making existing houses more energy efficient. Since 2009, more than 600,000 homes in the United States have been retrofitted. This program focuses on low-income families and has had a triple effect. First of all, the program has reduced the energy consumption in these houses by adopting the latest energy-saving techniques. Secondly, it's created green-collar jobs as someone has to do these retrofits. And thirdly, it has allowed these low-income families to save around $400 per year on their energy bills. Sweden has had its own amazing journey in this regard. In the 1970s, Sweden was one of the most oil-dependent countries in the world. Today, you're a global environmental leader. Your success in dramatically reducing emissions proves that it's possible to do so while retaining economic growth and making people's lives better. Although we've seen a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in the United States since 2006, we recognize that domestic action is not enough. Only by engaging with partners abroad will we be able to solve the global climate and energy security challenges we all face. There's so much that the US and Sweden can learn from each other. To this end, the US Embassy in Sweden launched the Swedish-American Green Alliance, or SAGA for short, with the Swedish government in February 2010. We view SAGA as a platform to connect, convene, and celebrate Swedish and American researchers, entrepreneurs, policymakers, journalists, legislators, activists, industry leaders, and academics working on energy and environment. We can do so much more together than we can individually, both for the benefit of our own countries and to create and deploy innovative green solutions for others. The first 2.5 years of SAGA have generated a number of concrete initiatives. On the political side, Sweden joined the Clean Energy Ministerial, which was launched by the United States in 2009. The Ministerial serves as a global forum to promote policies and programs that advance clean energy technology and best practices. Sweden joining this framework is a testimony to the great Swedish tradition of combining growth and sustainability. We were very pleased, but not surprised, to see Sweden sign up to 5 out of 11 initiatives as it entered the ministerial. SAGA also connects US and Swedish cities. In the United States in particular, many of the environmentally sustainable initiatives come from the local level. In 2010, the US National League of Cities and the National Association of Swedish Eco-Municipalities signed an agreement of cooperation under SAGA, and since then, mayors from our countries have visited one another and exchanged best practices in the field of urban sustainability. In March, city representatives from Baltimore, Cleveland, Dubuque, and Minneapolis visited Stockholm and Malmö to learn from Swedish experiences, but also to share best practices from their cities. In 2012, this year, the embassy launched React US under the SAGA umbrella. Through this React US, the embassy sent 5 Swedish master's students to 5 different cities in the United States to observe their environmentally sustainable practices. This is another example of how we try to incorporate cities while also reaching out to the next generation. On the business side, the U.S. Embassy assisted in setting up a partnership between E3 Partners of Seattle, a company constructing next-generation biorefinery and advanced biofuel plants, and Swedish business Agritech. This technology partnership will make both companies more successful in producing clean tech solutions for our countries and the world. Another example is Swedish Biogas, which has brought its technology and investment to Flint, Michigan, where it's building a waste-to-energy plant that will produce biogas for the city's buses. This will not only reduce pollution, but it creates good jobs in America and good business for Sweden. That's the kind of mutual success that can be achieved through SAGA. When speaking of waste-to-energy solutions, I also want to mention U.S. company Babcock & Wilcox, which is providing the municipality of Helsingborg with a brand new waste-to-energy boiler for their new power plant. This means good export business for American companies, jobs, and a cleaner environment for Sweden. Again, that's good for both of us. Such initiatives are also great examples of what is being achieved through the Department of Commerce's National Export Initiative and Select USA. NEI is an effort to double U.S. exports over the next 5 years by working to remove trade barriers abroad and by helping firms, especially small businesses, overcome the hurdles to new export markets. Select USA is an initiative to highlight the many advantages the United States offers as a location for business and investment. For more success stories, I'd like to encourage you to visit the Swedish-American Green Alliance's internet platform, where we post daily clean energy stories about what is happening in and between our two countries. So it's www.swedishamericangreenalliance.org. Every second month, the embassy compiles some of the most compelling stories from this site and sends out a newsletter to the U.S. Secretary of Energy, Stephen Chu, a number of Swedish ministers, and the full Saga network to spread the good word. So never hesitate sending the embassy a story that you'd like us to communicate. Lastly, I'd like to mention the Swedish Embassy in Washington, D.C., which has been a tremendous partner. The Swedish Embassy and the Swedish Trade Council are organizing numerous clean energy events every year at the House of Sweden that bring together Swedish and American businesses, policymakers, NGOs, and scientists. In conclusion, the United States understands the real threats posed by climate change and continued reliance on fossil fuels. We are committed to addressing these challenges and doing so both domestically but also internationally by collaborating with partners like Sweden. We can achieve much more working together than we can individually, and Saga is an effective platform to help us do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to ask you, I know this is not your exact area of decision making, but policy making, but you, with your background, you've been bureau chief in Beijing and also now you're working at the nexus of the US foreign policy apparatus with Europe. Often in the international negotiations, there's been the perception that the West, in the sense that Europe and the US has special responsibility to go forward together and then try to challenge China to follow. But now, in the later years, there's been an alternative scenario whereby Europe and China, both being ahead in terms of emission reductions up until now at least, would go it alone and challenge the United States. What would be your views on that? And do you think that this is a scenario, and does the US wish? There's also an alternative scenario with the US and China, of course, moving ahead separately.
Right. No, that's a very good question, and that's what I think the US has been saying all along, that, you know, even from the days of the Kyoto Protocol, that we actually need to make sure that all of the major economies are on board. And, you know, at that time, China and India didn't sign on to the Kyoto Protocol, and so one of the things that we wanted to make sure of in Durban, which was the most recent summit, that was that all of the major economies actually were, were signed up to do the same things. So to actually have a legally binding agreement where all countries can actually submit exactly how much their emissions will go down by, and so, you know, that's something I think it's a very valid question, because I think nothing can really happen until all of these economies are on board.
But does the U.S. fear that China and Europe make up outside the influence of the United States, or would that be a negative thing for the United States? No, you seem to imply that all should be at the same table, and you would not like the US.
I don't think we fear that at all, but I think it's not necessarily a realistic way to proceed. So I think if we are all at the same table, a lot more can be accomplished. I mean, I know from being in China that there's a real development in the renewable energy sector, and in some ways they were ahead of, both Sweden and the US in terms of developing that sector. And it was out of a sense of need because they have such high energy security demands. And so that's something that we would like to be able to harness and to be able to cooperate on. So, both with our companies and with their companies and expertise, that we should all sort of work together.
What is the room right now for the US to be a proactive actor on international environmental issues, given that the elections are coming up, given that the administration doesn't have a majority in Congress, and so on and so forth? Is there anything to be expected really from the US on the federal level until after all those electoral processes?
Well, I think we have been in the lead. The administration has made it a real priority to promote the clean energy portfolio. And so, for example, in Durban, the U.S. contributed $5 billion to the Green Fund, which will help developing economies adapt to climate change challenges. And then also, I think, it's not just on the federal level, but also on the local level in the U.S., where a lot of these things happen. So, just recently, over 1,000 cities in the U.S. signed onto a pledge that was the same as what the Kyoto Protocol was, that they would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 7%. So that actually reaches over 100 million people. So it's very important to keep that in mind as well.
The Saga network seems to be more centered on the state or even on the municipal level than on the federal level. What does Congress say about those things? I don't know if you have you can comment on that, but isn't this circumventing the Congress, in fact, in those issues?
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, I can't speak for Congress, obviously, but I think it's important that on both levels that we're both focused on the same goals. So I think having the municipality level and the federal level, working in parallel towards the same goals is what we have in mind.
I will now bring in some questions from the audience. I know if you could, and especially now that we have a limited time, I use the classical moderator phrase that a question is actually one sentence with a question mark at the end. Please be brief so we can have a maximum number of answers. And if you want to, it's not absolutely necessary, but please state who you are and what you work for. Who dares to take the first question?
Hi. Hi. Do you have a microphone? No.
Well, I think go ahead because the microphones will pick up.
Jacob Lundström, freelance writer. So, short and sweet, what would a Romney win mean for policy?
I don't think I can answer that question. I think you'd have to ask the Romney campaign that. But I think he tried to address some of these questions in his recent Europe tour, but you know as much as I do on that front.
Will there be a pause in policy making and practice until January 2012?
No, that's not.
No.
Yeah, no, that's not how it works. We try to maintain some continuity
throughout the campaign. Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry that the administration can't answer for the Romney campaign.
And we can't talk about domestic politics at all, actually. So.
Yes, indeed. The next question, don't be frightened because yes, to ask yes.
Okay, Lars Zetterberg, Swedish Environmental Research Institute. I've been following US and EU policy for a while, and I'll be short here. I see while EU policy, climate policy has stalled a bit due to blocking by Poland, US is making remarkable progress and seems to be on track with its pledged target of reaching minus 17% emissions reduction. So I think there's a window of opportunity for the US to take leadership in climate policy. And are you considering this possibility? And in that case, what actions are you considering on the international arena?
Well, I think, I mean, it's exactly that sort of perception that we're trying to, to make clear that I think a lot of people, especially in Europe, still see the U.S. as, lagging behind in the climate arena and the green initiatives. But I think what we would like to do is to, be a leader, but to make sure that we are bringing everyone with us. So not just to kind of, have sort of initiatives that we're just, doing without any partnerships around the world, but to make sure that through things like Saga, like other partnerships that we have to, to move forward together. So.
Is it a necessity to move forward outside the UNFCCC also, or is UNFCCC still your main area of focus, or how is the thinking within the administration? I don't know if you can say anything on policy-wise on that, but what?
Yeah, I would actually refer you, back to the department on that front, because it's,
I guess it's a sensitive issue. There was another question at the back, and please do signal to me. I try to pick up the signs, and don't be timid. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Fredrik Hannes. I'm calling from the Stockholm Resilience Center. I was wondering, since the new extraction techniques have become available for fuels, and there seems to be quite large resources in the US, and as a consequence, it seems like the US could reduce its dependence on fossil fuels especially from countries like Saudi Arabia. How do you see this will impact long-term foreign policy for the US?
That's a very good question. I mean, I think having the sort of energy independence is a real goal, and so sort of trying to get more of our energy from natural gas, for example, and moving from more carbon-heavy gases is something that we're really focused on. I think in the future, we wouldn't want to, I mean, I don't think that much of our foreign policy is based around, sort of oil dependence. I think we make our partnerships and alliances for other reasons as well. So I think, I don't know what kind of an impact it will have on foreign policy, but I think it's still very much a goal to, to have more sort of independence in that realm.
Given the U.S. is the U.S. still concerned about who the suppliers of natural gas are today, or is the revolution with the extraction through fracking of natural gas in the U.S. changing this kind of foreign policy game? I know, sorry for rephrasing a bit what you already said. How do you perceive that situation? Do you feel that the U.S. is what is the U.S. concern in the natural gas discussion?
Well, I think, again, we have to look at our foreign policy holistically. So, definitely we think about where we're getting our natural gas from, but it does give us a bit more, sort of leeway to have that as an option, rather than being oil dependent. So, we all remember days when we were less, we had less freedom in that realm. So it's a good position to be in.
Please.
Alex Glanov from the Russian Embassy. Thank you for your presentation, Madam Secretary. Last week, Ambassador Brzezinski wrote an article in one of the biggest newspapers It was concerning the joint activities of US and Sweden within the framework of the Arctic Council.
That's right.
And he mentioned that both Sweden and the US are engaged in a working group, also called short-lived climate force. Could you please elaborate a little bit more about this subject? Why is it so important for the US and for Sweden to work on reducing the consequences of the short-lived climate forces in the Arctic? And I understand that it's also more broader than the Arctic.
Right. Well, in the Arctic, as we all know, being members of the Arctic Council, it takes the brunt of climate change more than in any other part of the world. So it's a place that really reacts quickly to these sorts of forces. So I think we, all 8 members of the Arctic Council have to make sure that we all work together and understand the all of the challenges involved. And so it's great that we're able to to have this cooperation with Russia and with others.
It's about making a legally binding agreement.
But
sorry.
Yeah, please, please.
Yeah, thank you. So the aim is, as far as I understand, to agree on a legally binding sort of document on this short-lived climate process. Am I correct?
I think that is something that we want, yes.
The short-lived climate gas, the black soot and so on, is one of those parallel tracks to the UNFCCC. Is that the way forward now? Are we going to see more and more of those parallel tracks? As you mentioned, you have the local tracks here in Sweden, this on the black soot and so on. Well, you deferred a bit to Todd Stern and to others just a minute ago, but still, from a strategic point of view, are those parallel tracks where you try to make small deals or separate deals, is that the way to go forward, or?
Well, I mean, I think we all have the actual, same shared goal in mind. So however you get to that goal, I think it can all be useful. So I think, whatever tracks we can find in pursuit of that same, achieving the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and having a cleaner environment, they can all work together.
And from in Sweden, there is very much commitment to the UNFCCC process and the UN structures. The perception is that in the US is much more doesn't have this commitment.
I don't know if we would have to compare ourselves in that way. I mean, I think we work well together, and so I don't think that should be the emphasis of our alliance.
Could the black soot kind of alliance that the short-lived climate forces with the Arctic, could that be expanded into new areas, or do you think that this is the end of the story, or is this the start of something bigger, or not?
I don't know if we have plans to. I think I think good initiatives are always welcome and can be on the table.
Okay, sorry, I'll bring in more questions.
Okay, I'm Rolf Johansson, independent researcher.
Yeah.
I have a rather short question here. What is the current U.S. position on nuclear power and its role regarding climate change?
I have to say, since my brief is not normally, what I do at the State Department is that I oversee our press and our public diplomacy for Europe. And so I do a lot of our public outreach. I'm not a specialist in environmental issues, and so this is a question that I would have to defer to some of my colleagues on.
Everything with nuclear is always sensitive. Yes, yeah.
Peter State from IVL Swedish Environmental Research Institute. You've been talking a bit about the drivers for American climate policy. Could you also reflect a bit on the trade-offs that impede the climate policy agenda?
Give me an example.
it could be that you feel that UNFCCC sort of agreement, Kyoto Protocol agreement would indeed national coordination capability, would need
actual what
development and so on and so forth.
I don't think so. I mean, I think you know, with the Kyoto Protocol, I think our issue with it was that not all of the economies were on board. So, so that was something that we found really important, and it's what we've addressed in Durban. So, you know, I think ultimately economic development, you know, I think it'll actually be better for having a you know, sort of a cleaner environment and sort of thinking about these issues. You know, Sweden and the U.S. have both made it clear that it's possible to move forward and to build our economies while we're still reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
So, yes, there was one question there also.
Peter Pettersson from the recycling area. My question is about the year when you start. You mentioned in the beginning of your presentation reduction of greenhouse gases -8% since 2006.
That's right.
Why 2006?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. I think that's just where we're measuring from.
Because it's always different years. The start date.
But I think even, you know, if you just look year by year, I think you would find the same results. So.
But the situation of being permanently in the defense of the Obama administration when you come to Europe, as you mentioned initially, that you are attacked by your European partners for not being bold enough and so on. At the same time, you don't have the majority in Congress. How can the administration sort of keep up until with this defense of U.S. environmental policy? What is the way forward? Is there no possibility that there will be new federal initiatives or international initiatives that can sort of unlock this situation?
Oh, I don't see the situation as being locked, and I mean, I think our record speaks for itself. I mean, what I've said about what the Obama administration has done since the beginning, and about our achievements, you know, reaching back even further. I think those are all things that speak for what the administration is trying to do. So I think, you know, what I meant about sort of the, you know, when I speak in Europe and what how the European public sees the U.S. is, you know, I think a lot of it goes back to the Kyoto Protocol and all that, and so that's something that now is far behind us, and so I think you just have to look more holistically at what our policies are and how far we've come. So.
And so there is no hope that there will be sort of a breakthrough again, or big initiatives from the U.S. side at this point in time. It will be even more micro initiatives, or how is the sort of the what is the expectations that we're supposed to set on the U.S. policy?
I think Secretary Clinton has been really far ahead on this issue, and that it will be a continuing issue through the end of the year. So I think she's actually probably planning to say something about climate change and the environment, and she's, you know, our administration has been focused on it for. So
even the last 6 months here, or even less, it's now we're down to 5 months, maybe even of of the Clinton secretaryship will have some action on this area, or should we expect that, or should we?
I think it's a very real possibility.
Yes. Okay. Okay. If you have, I'll take a final question, and then we will, because we have to keep your time schedule.
I know.
Also. And we'll take a final question. Then Lars will say something about our study about linking, on the more technical side, about linking the U.S. and who's going to take the last question?
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe there was somebody else who was waving before, but okay. Please.
Okay. I realize you're nearing the close of your term and all that, and would you say this administration is more to the side of optimism as goes technological change, rather than, you know, government mandate programs like weatherization, which is essentially giving money and incentives to private enterprise stuff? What is your concern in terms of fostering technological change in this area?
Well, I don't think
rather than throwing money at contractors.
Well, I don't think it's either or. I think weatherization has actually used new technologies, and so I think it's important both to look at new technologies and at initiatives that can produce new jobs and, you know, can actually work with what's already there. So I think looking at both of them is you know, what's important.
Thank you. Now we're just going to leave thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll just leave the word to Lars Zetterberg, professor from EVL, on those matters, and he will tell us about linking the California European emissions trading systems. It's a study that's coming up here at FORES. We're also going to have studies on ethanol, a big study of the international literature on ethanol, big debate about that, and it's going to cover all the main areas on ethanol, how all the different international publications have graded the positive or negative impacts of using ethanol as a fuel. It's going to be the first sort of IPCC style kind of study on this area. Also going to be a very in-depth study about the CDM mechanism, how the future of that will be, from Ulrika Raab, who's an international expert, but also based at the Energy Agency here in Sweden. And also we're going to have an anthology on economics for the environmental movement, nationalekonomi för miljörörelsen, led with 8 or 10 different younger and older economists here in Sweden who are going to write about what economics as a science can tell us if you are in the environmental movement. Those are just a few of the studies coming up, also having on electrical cars and on trucks during this fall. But now, with no further ado, we'll end up with study. Thank you very much. I think we can. Once again, you will have to excuse Mrs. Fang for the limitations of her brief that have been told to me. She cannot say everything she would like to, and she cannot always answer all questions as much as we can, but that is the game of foreign policy. Thank you very much for being as frank as possible and giving us some hope about the future in terms of the next 5 or 6 months of Hillary Clinton as Foreign Secretary. Thank you very much. As Secretary of State. Thank you. Lars.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good, turn this on? Okay, great. All right, my name is Lars Zetterberg. I work for the Swedish Environmental Research Institute. It's, of course, a great honor to be here on the side of the Assistant Deputy Secretary of State of the United States. So I'm going to say a few words about a study that's being commissioned by FORES. It's about the prospect of linking the EU emission trading system with an emerging emissions trading system in California. And you might know that the EU ETS, the emission trading system, has been running now since 2005 and is often referred to as the centerpiece of EU climate policy. It's the main policy instrument that the EU uses to reduce emissions of carbon dioxide. Also, the EU has communicated internationally that this instrument they hope to be form the backbone of the international carbon market, and they have a vision of creating a transatlantic link with the United States. And now that California is soon about to launch its own emissions trading system, of course, EU has turning its attention to California. And last year, EU Environmental Commissioner Connie Hedegaard met with the governor of California, Jerry Brown, to discuss linking of the two systems. So why is linking interesting? Well, economic theory suggests that linking two carbon markets in this way will lower the costs for reaching this emissions target. As the system which has the highest costs, they can buy reductions from the other system, and in this way both systems will reduce their costs. But also, this means that the price of carbon emissions will be equalized in the two systems, and this is also one of the targets, because this creates a level playing field for industries which are competing on the international market, that European industries and Californian industries are seeing the same price on carbon emissions. But also it has an important political implication. If California and EU would to link, this would be an important political signal to other countries, and this might result in the creation of this global carbon market. So FORES have asked me to analyze what are the prospects of doing this linkage, what are the possibilities and what are the challenges. Is this possible? And to go directly to the conclusions, I don't think this is very likely that it will happen, at least not in the short term. And the reason for this is that it's been very, very quiet in terms of communications about contacts between California and the EU Commission. And in contrast, California has recently announced that it will link with the Canadian state of Quebec. So it doesn't seem that there is this real political motivation anymore. And also there are some practical obstacles, and that is that in California they will be using forest credits. That is that if you can lower emissions from forests, this can be used as a credit in the Californian system, and they will not acknowledge the CDM, the UN Clean Development Mechanism. And in contrast, the EU, they heavily relying on the Clean Development Mechanism and don't allow forest offsets. So this is actually a major problem, since when you link, you will be using the offsets used by the other system. And also you can read between the lines that both EU and California, they show concern that they will be losing control of the price of carbon. So EU wants to sort of be in control that the price of carbon is not too low and not too high, and the same goes for California. And when you link, you lose this control to a certain extent. However, there is some common ground that may facilitate linking in the long term, and that is that both parties are very positive to expanding the carbon market and to develop this global carbon market. And also, which has been discussed earlier, there was concerns by the EU that the US wouldn't have very strict targets, but now when you look at the figures, it seems like both California and EU will have about the same price on carbon, which means that they have about the same stringency in their ambition, and this is also important. So I think in a few years to come, if there will be a political will, I think that these differences in design features, they may be resolved, and this could lead to a linking in the future. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Lars, and thank you everybody for coming. On Thursday we will have another related discussion on the US elections. There you may have the answer about the Romney campaign, because you will have experts on the Republican Party coming here and on US political processes, and we will be coming back to those studies. There's also studies about the Chinese carbon market, others outside there. Thanks again, once again, Deputy Secretary Mrs. Fang, and everybody for coming. Thank you.